Everybody, man, I got a guy on the channel today. I am super excited. Let me tell you, I didn't sleep well last night thinking about today's interview. Man, let me tell you, my friends, I'm Anthony Brogdon. Let me get that out the way. But what happened was I wake up in the morning, I get on my computer, and early too, because the early bird gets the worm, and I'm tweeting and I'm Facebooking and all that social media stuff. There was an article about this young man, and I said, wow, I would love to get him on the show. So I Googled the company that he runs, and you'll hear all about that. And I called him. It was a Sunday. Let's listen to me. It was a Sunday, and understandably the business was closed. This brother got the message and called me back on Sunday. He said, "Let me let you know, my friend, that I want people to hear what I got going. It's divine order in his regard. Watch, you're gonna hear that. You're gonna feel it." And I am super excited to have him on the show today. So come on, my friends, hit the subscribe button because I'm giving it to you straight, no chaser. I'm intoxicating your mind through the people who come on this show. It ain't me. I just do my best to ask some intelligent questions, but I've I've made a better person since Strong Inspirations. And then hit the like button on this video because I know there is no love button. You're going to love what he got to say. You're going to feel the passion. Watch. I felt it in the phone call. And then hit the notifications bell for when the video comes up. You get notified. Your lights flicker. Your dog kicks you. Your horns on your cars go off. All kind of things happen to you. You get a tingling on your cell phone because things happen to you because there is new content on Strong Inspirations. Did you see the one I did with the guy who grew up in the Mississippi Delta? Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the guy who is a part of the Black Cowboy Foundation? And this is leading into some of what he's going to talk about, who's a farmer. And he talks about what farmers have gone through. Watch that video. How about the sister who is down there, and I can't remember the state, but what she's doing is helping Black farmers through finances and stuff like that. There's efforts down all across America. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the lady who talks about the Black Seminole Indians and the Trail of Tears? Can you imagine walking from Florida to Oklahoma? No way. Watch that video. And there's so many more. Frederick Douglass's great-grandson, watch that one. Madam C.J. Walker, the guy out of London, England, who is the chief historian for London, England. He's on the show. And it's my premise to continue to give you good content like what you'll find in this young man. Watch out. I'm telling you. When I say intoxicate your mind, not DUI, but where you stagger. And he's going to make you stagger with the good that he's doing. He has found his purpose. I'm not saying he didn't have it earlier, but when you hear it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So a couple more housekeeping things. You might know I'm a filmmaker, everybody. I'm this serious about what I do. It's called Business in the Black, because I did not know there were enslaved Black folks who own businesses. It's unbelievable. But you can't hold us down, no matter what the condition is. And then they bought their freedom, used the profits, bought their freedom, and then became wealthy. I talk about that and so much more in this film. It's streaming on Amazon. I got a book, everybody. Got to get your copy. It has become America's #1 Black business history book, and not just because I say so. There is no other book like this with all these facts. And I don't add no commentary. I don't dilute the fact. I number the facts. So you can look at this and say, hey, man, you talk to somebody. Did you read fact number 74? Fact number 39? 125? It's in the book. Get you a copy of that. It's on Amazon, and it is also on my website. And I don't have a copy here because I just shipped out the last one I had. I accidentally, and I got more on order. It's titled They Did It. It's a children's book. I got 30 Black business owners who lived in the 1800s. I'm not playing with you, my friends. And I got a movie coming out. Give me the next 3-4 months, but it's coming. It's titled They Did It, about 12 Black business people. And my man is waiting, but he's nodding, but I got to tell it to you. I'm going on the road. I spoke a lot of places here in my Detroit town, and now I'm going to Orlando. I'll be in Orlando the 23rd, 21st to the 25th of March, 2024. I'm going to Columbus, Ohio on the 12th and the 13th of April. And then I'm going to Galveston, Texas for Juneteenth. And that's this year, 2024. And I'll put all that on the website. And wherever I go, you want to show up, show up. Come on, join me. Let's party together because I get it on when I get there. I tell these stories and then I get to dancing or something. I'm still that young, so to speak. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. In my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong soul, brother. Come on, man. Thank you so very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for having me. It is an honor. I'm telling you, with all of the wonderful people that you have interviewed, to be able to receive your call and to have this opportunity, it is just a pure honor and a privilege to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us your name. We're gonna get it on.
I'm Jim Coleman, and I'm fourth generation farmer, owner of Coleman Crest Farm here in Lexington, Kentucky. It's Kentucky's first certified organic African-American owned farm in the state of Kentucky. And we're booming. And our farm has a lot of legacy. My great-grandfather purchased it 136 years ago, and I can't wait to get into the story.
All right. Well, before we do that, we got to talk about you for the guests to, the viewers to know a little bit about you. And so where were you born and raised?
I was born here on this farm. I was born here in Lexington, Kentucky on Coleman Crest Farm. And I was born in 1960. And I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. My parents were the 3rd generation owners of the farm. And I became the manager of Coleman Crest Farm at the early age of 12. My father made me the manager, paid me 3 hots and a flop. For those of you who all don't know what 3 hots and a flop are, that's 3 hot meals and a bed to sleep in, along with he made a commitment to sending me to college, paying for it 100%. And so I learned a lot about agriculture working for him and went off to Howard University, and life just took off from there.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about it. Where is the farm at? Well, where is it in Kentucky?
The farm is located in Lexington, Kentucky, right here in the center of our country, right here in Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah. And, it's not far from Louisville. We're about 80 miles south of Cincinnati and about 70 miles east of Louisville, Kentucky. All right. And we're in central Kentucky. And my great-grandparents, they were born into slavery in 1845. His name was James Coleman. Okay. And he got his freedom by joining the 5th Colored Regiment troops of the Union Army at the age of 19-year-old.
All right, we're going to get into that. I got to stay on you just a tad. We're going to get into that. And everybody, y'all hear the passion, right? You went to a grade school there. How far was other schools? How did you get to school? That kind of thing.
I went to a little country school called Briar Hill Elementary School, which is about 6 miles from our farm. And then once I graduated from there, I went off to Bryan Station Junior High and Bryan Station High School. And I graduated from Bryan Station High School here in Lexington in 1978.
Right. And how did you get to school? How did you get to school?
I got to school on a bus.
So the bus came, you walked at the end of the driveway, a yellow bus or whatever, picked y'all up.
We all got down there on the road. It was a long driveway at my farm, and I used to walk down to the road, and we had a specific place there on the road where the bus would stop and pick up myself and all of my friends in the community. And we would get on the bus, and it would be anywhere from 5 to 6 miles to get to school.
Oh, okay,
we'd have a good time laughing and talking on the bus. And one time my dog Spot jumped on the bus and the bus driver didn't realize for about a mile. And he said, "What are we going to do with this dog?" I said, "You got to take him and then drop him off on your way back home." So Spot became a part of a lot of fun. All my neighbors and fellow friends knew Spot, a
Okay.
Dalmatian that I had.
Was the school all Black?
It was not. It was integrated. It
Oh,
had
really?
African Americans and white people that were going there. It was fully integrated.
Oh,
Mhm.
did you have Black teachers?
Let me see. Throughout my elementary school, no. In junior high, I had one African American teacher who was my math teacher, and then I recall maybe one or two in high school. But
Oh,
a
okay.
lot of progress needed to be done in that area.
In the school. So you grew up on a farm. What is farm life like? How did you play?
You
How
know,
did you play?
we played with friends out in the front field, played touch football, baseball, and then we just enjoyed feeding the animals, raising crops, and we stayed lean. I had a cousin who lived in the city. He used to always feel sorry for us when he would come out to see us. His name is Jonathan Washington. And he said, "Cuz, every time we used to come out, we thought you all were starving. And then 40 years later, we realized y'all weren't starving. Y'all were just in good shape." And the reason why we
Really?
were in good shape is that we had a lot of activity going on all the time. We had to
Oh,
take care of
okay.
the animals, raise the crops. We always had a big garden. We had
Oh,
tobacco, and used to have to feed the animals. And so
oh,
when we get off the school bus in the afternoon, back home, we change clothes and get right to work. And so
okay.
that kept us very healthy. And then the food that we ate was always
Yeah.
very healthy. My parents were eating
Oh,
organic before organic was cool. So we would have
oh,
these big meals of green beans, and that would be it. Big meal
oh,
of brown beans and coleslaw and cornbread. So we ate a lot of vegetables that we grew
okay.
ourselves. And so we
All
were
right,
healthy.
couple more on that. Did you like being around the animals?
I
Does that
loved it.
smell? Is there a smell in the air?
Pigs did have a smell. Pigs did, because they can get out there and get in the mud and kind of smell it. But yes, animals do have a smell. They're
Yeah.
outside, and my job was to help to do my best to keep them clean and to keep them in a dry part of their pens and to keep them locked up and well fed, so we could sell them to the
Ah.
market.
Oh, okay. What
You get
about
used
this?
to
Because
it though. On a farm, you get used to the smells.
I'm a city boy. I must admit. What about the flies? Did the flies?
Flies were everywhere, especially when my mother would make a pot of cabbage. The flies were coming in faster than planes going into LaGuardia Airport. It was amazing. We'd have screen doors, and it would be almost dark in the house with so many flies on the screen trying to get in the house because they love the smell and taste of cabbage. And so they would try to get in, but flies were always everywhere.
Yeah. What about mosquitoes? Was mosquitoes a problem?
Mosquitoes were like crazy every night. We got used to mosquitoes. We dealt with all of the various insects that were out there. And so there was this whole supply chain of different insects that would eat different insects, but we did have a lot of
Yeah,
mosquitoes.
I can't
We
imagine.
did. We got
And
used
what
to it.
about the snakes? Was there? You
We
had to
had a
watch
lot of
out for snakes.
we had a lot of garter snakes, and they would be out there, and you want to have garter snakes because they're the ones that eat the moles and the mice, and so they have a major role on a farm. But when we would see them, my father would say, "Get the shotgun." Well, today now I'm a little bit more relaxed because I understand that we need to have garter snakes because they eat the moles and mice, and if you kill them, that offsets then that whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we need
Yeah.
them because we're growing a lot of potatoes. So we need our snakes to take care of all the moles and mice so they don't eat up all of our produce.
So you see a snake, you're not scared. You can even
Not
pick him
today,
up.
yeah. As a matter of fact, we call them Chris. I'm like, "There's Chris." And what that does, and I explain that to everybody that comes out for a tour, if they see a snake, I'll just say, "Oh, that's just Chris. He won't bite." We don't have poisonous snakes here, and they're all just out there just eating pretty much insects and moles and mice. So we value them. I call them one of our ecosystem partners, as a matter of fact.
Okay, just a couple more. 'Cause like I say, this is interesting. How
Yeah.
dark does it get? Where
I
you
had a
at?
cousin. I had a cousin. His name is Stanford. We always called him Stanny, and he lived up in Dayton, Ohio. And he always said, "I don't know what it was like. I'm telling you, when I came down to visit Uncle Bud and Aunt Cleo, it was always dark." Well, to me, it's beautiful out there. You can look up in the sky, see all the beautiful stars. But for city kids, it's pretty dark at night. It's
Yeah.
dark. But for me, I love it. I mean, now I look out at the sky and, I've got this app that tells you when the International Space Station's flying over. And every time I go out and look up, you can see it moving across the sky at 17,000 miles an hour. You can see all the
Really?
Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and all of the different forms of constellation out there of the stars. It's very clear
Oh.
because we don't have a lot of pollution out here in the country.
Yeah, oh sure. Got a couple more on this note. You knew everybody in town. What about the girls? How did that go? For a guy to go to the dance to try to have a
Yeah,
girl,
I was
everybody
kind of
knew
country.
everybody.
Anthony, I was country. So I didn't have a girlfriend until I went off to Howard University. And, I just didn't know
Wow.
a lot about girls. I didn't go to the prom. I did ask 3 girls. They all turned me down. But I was a
Wow.
country kid. When I went to high school, it was a mix between country kids and city kids. And, the city girls, they were like, I'm not going to date that country guy. He's a country bumpkin. And so it
Did
was
that
pretty
hurt your
difficult.
feelings?
Oh, absolutely. I can remember like it was yesterday for the 3 girls that turned me down to go to the prom. They said, oh, no, I already have a date. I'm like, how can this be? I'm calling way in advance and I could
Yeah.
not get a date. But I ended up after I went to Howard University, where it is I would call it the capital of the most beautiful women on the planet.
Oh, yeah, no
And
question.
my
Yes.
wife, Kathy Coleman, her name was Kathy Clash. She was absolutely the most beautiful girl and the smartest girl at Howard University. So the good Lord made up for all of me having to wait for so long to
Yeah.
be able to have a girlfriend.
I got a couple more. How did you know how Black life in the city? What I mean, did you have to read Ebony and Jet, or did you have
No.
black music on the radio? Any of that
My,
kind of thing?
we always had a subscription to Jet and Ebony. And so we always stayed informed with that. My parents were actively engaged. My father was an Alpha and my mother was a Sigma Gamma Rho. So they were active in the city and in their fraternities and sororities. They had graduated from Kentucky State. So they would oftentimes have sorority meetings and fraternity meetings at our home on the farm. And so it gave me a chance to see all these major giants because they were all leaders in these different fraternities and sororities. And so they would come out to the farm when my parents would host these meetings, and I would get a chance to see them, and I would hear all about Black history and what's going on both in our city and across the country. And so, but I
Yeah.
didn't interact that much with the city. When I left to go to Howard University, it was the first time I'd ever ridden in a taxi cab, first time I'd
Oh,
ever ridden
really?
on a bus, certainly the first time I'd ever ridden on a subway. I mean, it was for me, it was like going from Mars and then going to like living in New York City all in eight hours.
Really?
It was
Did it
unbelievable. A big change
intimidate
for
you?
me. At first I was intimidated. When my parents, my mother and brothers and sisters dropped me off, my father said, look, I'm busy. I got to go to work tomorrow. He handed me a $10,000 check to pay for all 4 years because of all my hard work. And he took out a note on the farm. He said, your mom and your brothers and sisters, they're going to drive you up to Washington. Don't mess up and don't come back. It's on you. So we left the next day, drove up to Washington, D.C., stayed with my cousins, Stanford and Paula Coleman. And then they took me over to the dorm the next day. And the dorm that I stayed in was an off campus dorm called Sutton Plaza on 14th Street in Washington, D.C., because they didn't have enough dorms on campus
Right,
because they had
right,
so many new students that were wanting to
right,
come to
right.
Howard. And they dropped me off and the car seemed like they were driving. I felt like I was on the Jetsons. I went from
Right,
being the Beverly Hillbillies to living like
right.
I'm the Jetsons because the cars
Yeah.
were flying by and the taxis were going fast, and told my mom and dad, I said, Mama, I don't know if I can make it here. She said, baby, you're going to be just fine. You're smart.
Yeah.
You can do
Well,
anything.
let me ask you that then. Since then, did that early grade school give you enough preparation for a
It did, but I
Howard or
struggled. I took the SAT, and my mother one day she came home, and I got on my knee and had my dog Spot Dalmatian. I said, how are you doing? She said, what are you trying to get that dog to do? I said, that's called personification, Mama. She just shook her head like this. She said, baby, you're so smart. I said, well, did I say anything wrong? She said, all I know is those Kennedy boys, John, Robert, and Ed, they went to Harvard, but you're going to go to Hyde. Now, I didn't know I was smart, and I didn't know anything about Howard University, but I believed anything my mother said. So she got me ready over the next year, got my application all ready, submitted it, sent it off to Howard University. I just knew I was going to go and be smart and be great because she said everybody that goes to Howard University, African Americans that go there, they come out and they rule. They run the world. And she said, baby, you're smart just like the Kennedys. You're going to come out and do great things too. We submitted the application. About 3 months went by. Didn't hear anything. All of a sudden, I got the letter in the mail. Mama, we got a letter from Hyde. We got a letter from Hyde. I opened it up. She said, read it, baby. They turned me down because I didn't do that well on the SAT. And my mother said, they don't know what they've done. And my father said, Cleo, he's going to be fine. He can go to Kentucky State. It's $400 a year down there. It's $1,800 at Howard. We can't even afford that. She said, he's going to go. I said, what are you going to do, Mom? She said, I'm writing a letter to that president. I said, Mom, he gets a lot of letters. She said, just trust in me and trust in the Lord. That night, she wrote a letter, Anthony. The next morning, when I woke up and had my breakfast, she had a little plate for me every morning of breakfast. Right beside my plate,
What
she
was
had this letter.
breakfast?
Oh, Joe bacon, fried eggs, toast, always fried potatoes. I mean, my life was tough. She said, baby, you want bacon, country ham, or Joe bacon, or sausage this morning? Country ham and sausage yesterday. All right, babe. I'll make you some Joe bacon. So I would have either Joe bacon, country ham, sausage. And it wasn't chicken sausage. It was pork sausage. And then she always had these fried potatoes and sometimes grits, and then either a biscuit or 2 slices of toast with a lot of butter on it, and a silver cup full of milk. And I would knock that
And
out.
a lot of that
Ready for
y'all
the
got
day.
off the farm, didn't you?
Most of it, we killed our own hogs. So everything that we ate, my father used to say on a pig, you can eat everything except the squeal. And he used everything. We would raise the pigs and take 3 off to get them processed, bring it home. He would put all the spices in it, and we would wrap them up in this white cloth, and then put them in a burlap sack, hang the hams up in the meat house. And around June, my father would say, it's time, it's June, it's June. So the hams out there sweating, it's time to take them down. We would take them down and take that wrapper off, and they would be like golden and reddish, just beautiful. And then they would drain the salt off, then cook it. We would have it, and my father would also send stuff, send country ham and Joe bacon and sausage off to all of his brothers and sisters who lived all over the country. But it was big. We ate everything local here at our farm, and that's why people lived a long time in the country.
How you kill a pig and the animals?
Well, we would take them to the processor, and what they would do is they would have them coming through a chute and take a 22, bam! The pig would steal one last time and hit him right in the head with a 22, take the back hoof to a chain and have him hanging up. Then they would take a knife across their neck, and then all the blood would come out from the aorta. So it was upside down, hanging from a chain, and then within minutes, all the blood would be gone. Then they would cut it open from the belly, open it up, and then take all the chitlins and all that stuff out. Then they would cut it in half and start breaking it out for the ham, and then the ribs and all the different parts, even, pig's feet. We'd bring back the pig's feet and chitlins and everything. And even the hog head. When my wife first time she came home, my mother said, we're going to cook something special for Kathy. And when we got home, they were all happy to meet her. And she said, look at what we cooked, baby. We only do this for special guests. And she opened the door up, and I knew what it was. It was a pig with an apple in its mouth. My wife started screaming.
I'm sure.
I said, it's dead. It's okay. We're going to eat it in a little while. She said, I ain't eating no hog head.
Right.
And after she saw us eating it, I gave her some of that chow with it. She fell in love with hog head. This is a woman that grew up in the city of Washington, D.C. that was high class. And within about an hour after eating that, she was hooked to eating hog head and souse.
Now, hold on. I got to ask you this. Now, did one of them pigs become your friend, and you was talking about, don't kill it?
Of course. We had this big pig named Charlie, and he would breed all the, the girl pigs to make all the other pigs. But he got so big and out of control, my father said, Charlie's got to go. I'm like, you can't kill Charlie. I said, my father said, Charlie's gone now. Charlie has paid his dues. So he put Charlie on the truck one time when, Charlie had gotten out of control, and had Charlie sent to the processor, and he came back sliced up, and we turned it into nice ham and sausage. My father, one time, I was like the taster, Anthony. My father would take the sausage, then he would put all the extra spices in it. And I was the taster. He'd fry it in the skillet. And one time he said, taste it. And I tasted. He said, what does that sausage need? I said, 2 eggs, 2 slices of toast, and some grits. He fell out laughing. But it was amazing to see him. We would raise the pigs, then have them processed, then he would massage all the spices, and I would help him hang it up and then eat it. We were self-sufficient on our own. We were off the grid. We didn't have to rely on anything. We were off the grid.
All right.
My mother made me gentle. My father made me a man. Today, I'm a gentleman. But
Yeah.
we were off the grid. We were self-sustained. We did not have to go to Walmart or Kroger. We got our own eggs. We had our own chickens. We ate and we were off the grid. And I thought everybody was living like that until, I went to Howard. Everybody, I'm like, y'all go to all these stores. Y'all don't, they didn't know where ham or bacon went. They don't know where hot dogs. And I'm like, I make hot dogs. I make ham.
Wow. A couple more. Where did the white people live? And did you know to be careful of white people?
Now, the community that I lived in, it was called, I'm here today, is called Udingertown. And Udingertown is one of the 20 hamlets in what we call Fayette County, which is where Lexington is located. And these hamlets were created by where recently freed slaves, that's where they lived. They had worked on the farm. Most of them had worked on these big farms that were either thoroughbred racing horse farms or big tobacco farms. And so the big owners of these farms always wanted them to live close by, so they would allocate, a little few parcels for African Americans that worked at these farms. And so they became hamlets, which are, 100 to 150 people living in the community. And so my little community was called Udingertown, and I love Udingertown today. And that's where the farm is, and that's where at that time it was pretty much 100% African American. We had our own retail store. We had what Booker T. Washington called the Union Benevolent Society. That's where my great-grandparents were able to receive a loan out of the Union Benevolent Society. We couldn't get loans from mainstream banks, so they did something very unique. Booker T encouraged us to pool our money together and come up with a credit facility for ourselves and to issue loans to each other. And they did that. And as a result of that, my great-grandparents and millions of other African Americans in the United States were able to buy land. By the end of the 1920s, because of that model, African Americans had purchased 14 million acres of farmland in the southeastern part of the United States, which at the time represented 15% of the available farmland in the United States. Today, we only own about 1 million of those acres, and it's dwindling away every year. If we owned all of that acreage, because a lot of it was in North Carolina, South Carolina on the ocean, if we owned all of that land today, our people would have $1 trillion worth of wealth. And as you know, Black Enterprise is saying by 2053, African-American net worth will be 0. So we've got to fix that.
Yeah. A couple more. I want to go back on your upbringing. How close was the next house?
Wow. I'm looking at right now across the road. If you would say it was a walk, it wasn't like I could hear my neighbors next door.
Oh,
I mean, I'm talking about a farm. We all had space. That's why people who grew up on farms, that's why they don't trust the government. They don't trust anybody. They're like, you've got a big old fence. We're okay. The only people that come through that fence, it must be trouble. That's why everybody has a shotgun in the house and a couple of guns. When I grew up, we had probably 12 guns. My father had a rack of guns. His gun was at the top. It was a 12-gauge pump shotgun. My two brothers had the 22s, and then he had another special gun. And I was too young to have a gun at the time. I was only like 10. I said, Daddy, I want to have my own gun. All right, all right. He came home the next day with the toy rifle and put that on the rack. And I couldn't wait to where one day I could shoot 20 gauge and 22s and 12 gauge. I guess I probably started shooting guns when I was around probably 15.
Shoot them at trees, or did you shoot them to kill animals?
Oh, my mother would come home and she said, babe, I think we're going to have rabbit tonight. Now, that didn't mean, okay, Mama, when are you going to cook it? That meant get the shotgun out and go back and kill 2 rabbits and bring it up here so I can fry this rabbit.
Wow.
So when she would say, baby, I think we're going to have some rabbit tonight, I would just go in and load up, get the Maxwell House can of shells. So we'd always keep the shells in a Maxwell House can, take it, put a few in my pocket, load up my 12 gauge, or I had a 12 gauge and a 20 gauge. 20 gauge didn't destroy the rabbit as much as a 12 gauge. So I would normally use my 20 gauge, and I'd go in the back, and it would be maybe 45 minutes. I'm coming back with 2 rabbits fully skinned, heads off, gutted out. And my mother said, look at what you have for Mama. I'm like, and they're big too, Mama, and they're big. She said, baby, you are something else. You are just a man. You are just a man.
Yeah.
She said, and you go out there and kill the rabbit. She'd have this black gravy and biscuits, and it was a delicacy. She'd have always some spinach. All the food that we were eating was high in protein and iron, and it was just good food. Good food. I mean,
now, let me
we eat rabbit that I just killed about an hour before.
Wow, let me divert from that. In that area that you grew up, what is there any stories of lynching, or let's go into some history and that kind of thing of the community?
No, I don't recall of any kind of lynching that went on. Kentucky was more of a border state. It did have slavery, but it didn't. I don't recall any history where it was like in Mississippi or some of the other further southern states where
Oh,
they had all this
really?
lynching going on. I just
Yeah.
didn't. I don't know of any history like that. My parents were good historians, so I would have known, and I'd be able to answer
Yeah.
yes if it were. But I don't. They didn't tell me of any types of lynching that was going on.
What about from the civil rights standpoint? Did they have to protest in town and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. My mother was a major driver at my local school at Briar Hill. One time they had this play where they had the black kids for some reason dressed up like we were chimney sweepers. And my mother was in the audience. She just stood up. And it was probably about 200 people in the audience. She just stood up and went up on the stage. She said, "This is the worst case of racism that I've ever seen."
Wow.
And she took my sister and I off the stage and she said, "This is unacceptable. This is the worst case of racism that I've ever seen." She was powerful. My parents were not afraid of anybody. My mother was more powerful than Angela Davis. She was a
Wow. I love it.
professional and a fighter. She was the first chief social worker at Eastern State Hospital, but she was no pushover. She was certainly a Southern belle, but when she was mad, she would stand up for what she believed in. But she stood up at Briar Hill Elementary and she got that teacher and the principal in got him in trouble for doing
Yeah.
that. She stood up.
Uh,
She said, "This is
but
the
but
worst case of racism
but
I've ever seen."
but back in the day, and we're going into your story now.
Uh-huh.
There were plantations in your community.
Oh, absolutely. The big horse farms are basically the big plantations. Most of the horse farms here in Kentucky have a big mansion on them. They're super wealthy people. So yes,
How does somebody how does a enslaver become wealthy?
uh,
Like you just talked about.
like
What
my
makes
how my
them
great
wealthy?
grandfather did. Well, first he got his freedom by joining the Union Army. When he got out,
No, I'm
uh,
talking about the white guy. How did he become wealthy? If they own plantations, that was a big profitable
well, you're
business.
not paying any labor expenses. First of all, for whatever you
Okay,
produce, 30 to
okay.
40% of your cost, if you're paying people, usually is labor. So think about it. You're growing and you're keeping gross. If you raise $2,000 worth of produce and sell it to the market, you don't owe anybody anything. So 30% or 40% of what you normally would pay in labor cost, you're not paying. You might be paying for taking care of chains and giving them an outhouse to live in and all that, but you're not paying any kind of labor expenses.
So
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 they made a ton of profit. The profit margin on what they were doing was 85% because they weren't paying any kind of labor.
but what was the cost to them? And I've said this to people to have slaves. You had to clothe them. You had maybe some
Oh,
medical.
clothing. You gotta, they would give a little bit of medical. You'd have to give them a little bit of food. That's where African Americans learn how to eat soul food, the pig's feet, the, hog maw, chitlins. That's what our ancestors would eat. And that's like the leftovers of what they didn't want to eat. So it was the pig's feet, pig's tongue, hog head, souse, chitlins, hog maw, pig tail. So they would eat all of that, which were the leftovers after you take the bacon and all of the loins out and the hams. Then what was left were those key things. And that's what they would give to their slaves. And then they would give them little, very meager living conditions. But they didn't pay anything, of course. They didn't pay anything. And they
And
worked
then
hard. They worked
then
hard.
there was a tax. You had to pay a property tax on your slaves.
Well, they would pay that, but that, was something that at the time they could afford because they didn't have the labor expense. But it became very tough for a lot of plantation owners, especially, as we were getting closer to the Civil War and unrest. You had slaves who were standing up and saying, they were fighting back. And so it became very difficult for these slave owners to continue to have slaves because, again, Kentucky was more of a border state. So you
Right,
had
right.
both opinions going on. You had abolitionists saying it's unfair, and you had people that were also saying it is. It's the only way to keep the economy stable. but that helped to educate a lot of slaves to where they had rights and they didn't have to tolerate this kind of abusive behavior. So
Oh,
it
I
became
love it.
more difficult. You had uprisings that were going on, and slaves that were being mistreated would push back on this. And so, like Henry
Mm.
Clay created the American Colonization Society. He was the Speaker of the House at the time, known slave owner. That was a normal thing back then. And he created the American Colonization Society to allow any freed African American that wanted to go there to go and start your own country. And in some of the ways of why he did it was that it took the African Americans, the one that wanted to fight back and push back. They were like, okay, you're rebellious, you can leave and go set up your own country. And they were like, I'm out of here. And I had an ancestor, his name was William D. Coleman, still trying to do the DNA work, but he lived here in Fayette County. He and his mother, they left and went across the ocean to Monrovia. On inland, about 12 miles, was there Clay Ashland, 40 square miles of land. And he became the 13th president of Liberia. But there was those types of uprisings were going on throughout the South. And that's what also led to the Civil War.
Yeah, okay. This, as you said, Civil War. What did this? Was there battles in Kentucky?
Let me see. There were. I'm ashamed right now that I don't know any of right now, right off. I know that Camp Nelson was a major base where they trained hundreds of thousands of African American men to fight in the Union Army. Then they would go off to Richmond and West Virginia and Tennessee and other places where there were major battles. My great-grandfather went to Milliken's Bend. That was a major battle in Milliken's Bend, Louisiana. And it was such a decisive battle because recently freed slaves defeated the Confederate Army in that battle. General McCulloch, who was the general on the side for the Confederates, said they could have won that war if it weren't for the freed African Americans. They were so decisive in winning that President Lincoln and General Grant decided to ramp up the recruitment of recently freed slaves. And that was a major factor in the Union Army winning the entire Civil War as a result of that. But it started at Milliken's Bend because African Americans, President Lincoln said they would fight and they will fight and they're capable of fighting. And they proved themselves. Today, there's a national monument in Washington, D.C. for all of the African Americans who served in the Civil War. I went there back in October, and for the first time, I saw my great-grandfather's name on that wall.
Wow.
And I learned about that because I got his military records. I take the subscription of ancestry.com for all of your viewers out there. Find out who you are. Join ancestry.com or something that gives you this kind of data, as well as get your DNA checked. I found out with getting my DNA checked, I'm 48% Nigerian. And that just tells us so much about who we are. You can do research and understand your personality because it's a timestamp on how we operate. The way we operate is not something new. It's really from thousands of years ago. And my family came from the Igbo tribe, and they were great entrepreneurs, and they loved farming. They put their young men to work. Everything that my father did and what I've read about the Igbo tribes, he's like an Igbo chief.
Oh, I
the way he operates. And he didn't know that when he was alive, but I found that out by joining Ancestry.com, and it's given me an enormous amount of information about my family.
Let me ask you this now. Let's go into the story of what you were telling me. You're on the farm that your great-grandfather, three-time, I guess, was enslaved on.
My great-grandfather. His name was James Coleman. He was born in 1845 into slavery. 19 years old, he's joining the Union Army for two reasons. One, so he could get his freedom, and two, to try to preserve the Union so that all African Americans would have their freedom.
But let me ask you this. I mean, okay, he was born enslaved on that farm that you live on.
Yes.
In the house that you live on.
He was working this farm, not in the house that I currently have, but he built a new house once he got his freedom. And then when he bought the land parcel that he had, but he was a slave, he and his family tilled the land that he later purchased. They tilled it as slaves.
All right. Now,
it was a family called the John Darnby family, and they purchased a lot of land in our area from the slave owners, and then they would sell parcels off to various freed African Americans after slavery was over. And,
I got you.
They got their rights.
Who was the enslaver?
I don't know the enslaver. I haven't been able to put my finger on that. I do know that they purchased the land from John and Mary Darnby on March 27, 1888. But I haven't been able to. I do know that The Dorset family of Spotsylvania, Virginia, were the original owners of all of my ancestors. That's John and Nellie Dorson. And the reason why I know that is my granduncle, Uncle Sam, used to tell the story. We were from Virginia and we were Dorsons before we were Colemans. And his mother used to tell them that. And so I heard about this all the time. I never met Uncle Sam, but my father used to tell me what Uncle Sam used to say. So with the emergence of the internet, I did research. I just typed in Colemans, Dorson, Virginia. Boom. What came up was John and Nellie Dorson of Spotsylvania, Virginia. They had several children. They had this one daughter named Mary who left there, took a few, and this is in their documents online, took a few of their slaves with her to this bustling community called Lexington, Kentucky. At the time, Kentucky was a part of Virginia, and it said that she moved to Lexington, where she met and married a man by what? The last name of Coleman. That's when I concluded that John and Nellie Dorson were the original owners of my ancestors, because Uncle Sam's story, as well as what they put in documents online about what happened. The reason why we have the last name is that we took the last name of our owners. And so when we were owned by the Dorsons, we were Jim Dorson, James Dorson, Molly Dorson. But when Mary moved and took a few of the slaves with her who were my ancestors, and brought them with her so that they would work for her as slaves here in Lexington, she met and married a man by the last name of Coleman, and that's when their names changed and her last name changed.
Would you want to meet them, the ancestors of the Colemans?
You know, I would. You know, I was in Spotsylvania for a short time for a quick business trip, but it is on my punch list to go there and to meet some of their descendants, John and Nellie Dorson. They, from everything that I've read, they're movers and shakers. They're big people in Virginia. Spotsylvania, Virginia is south of Richmond. And so that is on my punch list to go there and to introduce myself and to let them know.
Yeah. What do you hear voices at night on that land? Voices of those who might have been enslaved, the cries.
You know,
do you see
I
the
had
footsteps?
That's a good question, because I had this lady to come out to the farm one time, and she was good in getting in touch with all the spirits. And I wanted to see if she could feel the spirits out here. And when she got out of the car, she instantly pointed to the area. She said, I feel it over there. She pointed. And where she was pointing, I didn't tell her until she walked with me over there. I said, you follow me and you'll be blown away by what you're pointing at. And she said, I'll follow you. She followed me up to my great-grandparents and my grandparents' grave site. And she said, I could tell, I could feel their spirits. And she said, I really need to be just left alone. She sat there on the soil and started praying and talking. And I was just amazed. But she said, there's just been so much oppression that's gone on your farm, so much pain, so much loss. And she said, I need to digest this all. But she said she could feel my great-grandparents and my grandparents' spirits. Now, she didn't even know that that graveyard was where she was pointed to. And that's what made me believe that she really must be connected somehow. Because when she went up there, she said, I knew it. And she just instantly started kind of like talking in tongues, like she could tell the spirits. And she said, there's just from the feel and what I'm hearing from your ancestors, there's just been a lot of oppression here on this farm, a lot of oppression and pain and suffering.
And is that indicative of, and I'm sure this is an easy question maybe, what the enslaver did, the brutality that he inflicted?
Absolutely. Mistreatment, rape, beaten, mistreated both psychologically and physical. I mean, the trauma that our people went through was just unbelievable. I mean, every day I'm amazed that my great-grandfather was born into slavery. And at the age of 65, he had been a landowner. In a short amount of time, in his 65 years of life, he went from being a slave, traumatic pain, joining the Union Army. He killed Confederates with his own bare hands.
Oh, really?
They did not have weapons that were as good as the others, as the white people that were in the Union Army. They had uniforms that were shredded. They had guns that sometimes wouldn't shoot, broken bayonets. And so they oftentimes had to kill with their own bare hands. And he killed Confederates to save his own life and to help save the Union. And then he came back, and even though he was legally free, we had major segregation that was going on here. They couldn't get loans. They couldn't go to college. They couldn't join, the Chamber of Commerce. They couldn't get access to political power. No one represented them. They were just out here. And what they decided to do is to seize the moment still and to build their own church, to launch what Booker T created, the Julius Rosenwald schools. And that allowed African Americans to become literate. You'd have one teacher teaching everybody from the 1st grade to the 12th grade, 40 to 50 students in a one-room schoolhouse that Julius Rosenwald would provide all of the materials to the community. He was Booker T's good friend, and he was the chairman of the board of Sears and Roebuck, and Booker T got him convinced to be able to provide all of these building materials to all of these African-American communities throughout the southeastern part of the United States to improve literacy. The men would build the schoolhouse, but Julius Rosenwald would donate all of the lumber and all the building supplies. And so with the Union Benevolent Society, that gave my ancestors access to capital, which they needed to buy land. They got access to education because of what Booker T and Julius Rosenwald did by having the Rosenwald schools. And then you had the church, which gave them hope. It was a center of hope that it's got to be something better than now, especially when we go to heaven. It's going to be joy. But we know the Lord is on our side. So they were very spiritual, and they believe that things can be better. We've just got to focus on the controllables, and that is making sure we protect our kids, that we pay back the loans to the Union Benevolent Society, and that we support Ms. House when she's teaching them how to read, that when they come back, boy, what you read this. Well, what does that say? I ain't gonna read it for you. What did Miss House say? You better be ready for tomorrow. Miss House is gonna kick you out. When Miss House was teaching across the road from my farm, she graduated first of all, everybody that graduated out of her school could read and write. Many of them went to Kentucky State, Lincoln University, Morehouse College, and excelled in life. Today, we're building schools here in Lexington that are $80 and $100 million, and 70% of third graders can't even read. Miss House, we need to get back to what Miss House was doing. She was doing something unique. Miss House was doing something unique.
Let me ask you this question. With that is said, shucks, hold on. Now, so you live on the land that your tell us the story.
So here's what happened. My great-grandfather, he had a total of 6 kids. He and his wife's name was Lucy Ward. And so James and Lucy raised 6 kids on the farm, 2 girls and 4 boys. Susie and Sally, George, William, John, and George. And they raised them, and they all participated in what the farm was all about, agriculture and raising tobacco. African Americans in this community and other communities would co-op. They would create co-op markets and sell to each other. They had their own economy. So a dollar that was made stayed in the economy and was rotated 100 times and stayed in the economy. Fast forward, James Coleman, he died in 1910. Lucy died before that. My grandparents, Molly and John, took over the farm in 1910. They raised a total of 7 kids on the farm. I've got a picture of them here in the back. You can see, hopefully, maybe you can see John and Molly right there in the back. Right. That's John and Molly Coleman. And by the way, that house that you're seeing, James Coleman built that house. He was not only a farmer, he was also a carpenter. And I just found out about that because one of my neighbors up the road who has a very similar house, they took all their stairwell out and turned one over and had James Coleman written on it. And it's the same signature that's on the deed of the day they purchased my farm. So I know it's him. So he was a carpenter as well. Well, John and Molly raised a total of 7 kids. The little boy that you see in the middle there, that's my father, Sam. And they had wonderful kids. 5 out of their 7 kids were able to go to college as a result of owning the farm. And it was creating wealth for them and stability, quite frankly. And it was safe to raise your kids. All the kids went to church every Sunday. It wasn't a chore. I don't want to go to Sunday school. We ain't even got a choice on that. We're going to go. Strict rules. You had nobody breaking into houses. If you stole somebody's chicken, you had to go in front of church and apologize and get caned after church. It was just a very disciplined community. And so my father was raised on the farm with his brothers and sisters. And then my parents went to Kentucky State. My father studied agriculture after serving in World War II. They graduated in 1949. Well, that same year was when John Coleman died. And that's when my father took over the farm, and my parents got married in 1950, and they raised 5 kids on the farm, with me being one of them. And then in 2001, my wife, Kathy, and I, we purchased the farm after my mother had come down with cancer. We purchased it from her in 2001, and I'm the sole owner today.
And
Yes.
so what a story. What a story. Let me ask you this. I talk to people and they always ask me, well, we had those black businesses, we had what you
Yes.
talking about, and then and then they always go back, how we got to think a little negative
Yeah.
of, well, what happened to us today? We don't own none of that. You an
What happened?
example
I can
of,
answer that.
yeah,
Some
go
of it
ahead, go
was
ahead.
through trickery, and some of it was through racism, but not the majority of it. What happened is that oftentimes, like James Coleman, who purchased the farm, he and Lucy, they died intestate. He died, his wife died before him. When he died intestate. What does that mean? He died without a will. So it was left to his heirs, who were 6 kids. 2 of his daughters sold off their parcels and moved to Lexington. So it reduced the size of the farm from 15 acres down to 13 acres. And what happens over time is that you continue to have owners who die without a will, and all of a sudden you just have heirs over time, 20, 30, 40 heirs for a 100-acre farm. And it just gets out of control. Nobody's paying the property taxes. Nobody's paying any of the debts that were left off from the person that took out the loan, and it gets foreclosed. Because people are all living in different parts of the country and they are not connected to the farm anymore, they sell it to a developer, somebody that offers a good price, and they sell it. So it's usually because of a lack of succession planning that has happened on why we've lost the majority of our acres over the last 136 years. And it's really
Let
a
me ask
sad
you,
situation. It's a sad situation.
well, a couple more. What happens when but what's the trickery that the white folks do to get the land from you too, though? Usually.
Well, a couple of things that happened when my great-grandfather, when he did come back, he was a sharecropper before he was able to buy the farm. And sharecropping is where you do the work, the owner picks up the cost on the seed and a lot of the other cost. You do the work, and at the end of the year, we split the profits. This one guy that my great-grandfather worked for when he was a sharecropper, he would just say, "James, there ain't nothing left. The boll
Right.
weevil got everything." And he would say, "Mr. Don, you saying it ain't nothing to share? Ain't nothing. The boll weevil done got everything. And I wish I had some, but he just ate us up this year. The tobacco had frog eyes on it. We didn't get nothing at the market, and ain't nothing to share. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let y'all stay, you and Lucy, on the farm. Y'all want to get to stay another year, but y'all don't have to work a lot harder this next year coming up. And we're going to give you another chance. Ain't nothing to share. Ain't nothing to share. I just said it ain't nothing. The boll weevil got everything. I took it to the market, and they just don't want nothing because all the insects just worked all the
And that's
crops
a
over.
lie
I
for
couldn't get them.
sure.
So that's where Booker T stepped in and created this Union Benevolent Society, which basically was a fund that allowed us to be empowered among ourselves. Instead of complaining, we said, what can we do? And we came together with a little bit of money that we did have, put it together, and issue loans to each other. And it changed the world. That was the day, March 27, 1888 was the day I was conceived. And so, as well as 300 other descendants from James Coleman. That's the day I was decided. The good Lord, that's the day I was decided, because it laid out the groundwork for economic independence, generational wealth, education, future, freedom, an opportunity to enjoy the American dream was set for me, as well as 300 other descendants over the next 136 years, because James and Lucy Coleman decided to seize the moment, got a loan for $1,200, and bought the farm that they had tilled as slaves.
So now, what are you doing on the farm now? You tell us about the business and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. What I'm doing right now is everything that my father taught me, and his father and his grandfather. James Coleman would be proud, because Coleman Crest Farm today it's the first African-American owned farm in the state of Kentucky that received USDA certified organic certification for producing produce here at our farm.
Okay.
And so because of that, we're very successful in the market. I've got about 8 great commercial accounts like it's called Ramsey's Diner. They've got 5 restaurants. We serve Critchfield's, which is a really large grocery store. Good Foods, which is it's a co-op. We do
Okay.
business with a firm called Black Soil. I'll talk a lot more about that later.
Yeah.
Black Soil connects us to all the food pantries where we can change lives. But bottom line is it's a thriving business. First year that I came home, we did 0, getting everything set up. Second year, we did about 8,000. Last year, we did 15,000 in gross sales. This year, Anthony, we're going to be doing over $100,000.
I love it.
I'll explain that on our next
what's the website so people can follow you?
Our website is www.colemancrestfarm.com. That's COLEMANCRESTFARM.com. ColemanCrestFarm.com.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming on the show. This is Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. For those who wonder what happened to our wealth, it has not gone away, and this man is an example of that. To you, my brother, I say, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Everybody go to the website. There's a way you can support them and buy from them, maybe somehow. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net. We will come back at you with this gentleman again to hear more of his story. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.